"I don't deserve your help," she said. But the Mafia boss had already bought her a new apartment. The bell above the diner door was a liar. It chimed, a bright, cheerful sound in the 3 a.m. silence, but it never brought anything good. At this hour, it only brought the dregs, truckers running on fumes and regret, drunks stumbling in for sobering-up grease, and the lost, hollow-eyed souls who had nowhere else to be. And then there was me, Lena Vance. I was the one pouring their coffee, my hand steady even when my stomach was tight with a familiar, metallic dread. Every time the bell chimed, my shoulders seized. My eyes would snap from the coffee pot to the door, my heart doing a painful little kick flip against my ribs. I'd scan the face, the build, the walk. Not him, not Eli. My breath would leak out and I'd turn back to the counter, wiping at a stain that was already gone. This was my life now. Here, at the Crossroads Diner in East Briar, a graveyard shift under buzzing fluorescent lights, a constant, low-grade hum of anxiety, and the ghost of a man I'd run from. I had been here for 6 months. 6 months of living in a damp basement apartment that always smelled like mildew. 6 months of walking home in the gray dawn. 6 months of pretending I was invisible. Survival. That was the only goal. I didn't deserve kindness. I didn't deserve peace. I just deserved to be left alone. 2 weeks ago, a new customer started coming in. He was different. He didn't fit the trucker or the drunk or the lost. He'd walk in around 2:15. Always. His shoes were polished, shining even on the grimy linoleum. He wore dark, tailored suits that probably cost more than my entire year's rent. He was tall, with dark hair cut short, and a stillness that was almost unnerving. He looked like he'd stepped out of an old, expensive photograph. He always took the same booth, booth 4. It was tucked in the back corner, the vinyl seat cracked like a spider web, but it gave him a clear view of the entire diner, and of me. The first night, I approached him with my pad and pen. "What can I get you?" He didn't look at the menu. His eyes, dark and heavy-lidded, met mine. They were calm, assessing. Coffee, black. His voice was low, a rumble that seemed to vibrate in the air. I nodded, poured his cup, and left him alone. He stayed for exactly 1 hour, drank 2 cups of coffee, left a $20 bill on the table for a $3 tab, and left. He came back the next night, and the night after that. He never read a paper. He never looked at his phone. He just sat and nursed his coffee and watched. He watched me handle the grill when Sal, the cook, was out back. He watched me wipe down tables. He watched me force a polite smile for a customer who was holding my hand a little too long while counting out change. It wasn't a leer. It wasn't the hungry, possessive way Eli used to watch me. It was something else. Observant, patient, like he was memorizing a map. I was wary of him, deeply. I knew danger when I saw it. I had lived with it, breathed it in for 2 years. This man was dangerous. But it was a different vintage. Eli was a firecracker, loud and messy and unpredictable. This man was the deep, cold water you drown in. The other men sensed it, too. The diner was a small place, and whispers traveled. I heard them call him Moretti. When he walked in, the truckers would hunch over their plates. The drunks would sober up, just a little. Sal, my boss, who would yell at anyone, just nodded at him. "Mr. Moretti." Mr. Moretti would just nod back. He made me nervous, but it wasn't the same electric panic Eli inspired. It was a heavy, weighted awareness. I felt the exact moment he entered the diner. Even with my back turned, the air pressure changed. Tonight, the rain was lashing against the windows. It was a slow night. Just me, a trucker in booth 1, and a regular we called Whiskey Rick, perched at the counter. Rick was mostly harmless, just lonely and soaked in cheap bourbon. Tonight, though, he was in a mood. "Another one, Lena Bean," he slurred, pushing his empty cup toward me. I sighed, picking up the pot. "Rick, maybe you should switch to water." "Just one more. Come on." He reached out, and before I could flinch away, His hand clamped around my wrist. It wasn't gentle. His fingers dug in. "Just one smile for old Rick. You're always so sad. Smile for me." I froze. The smell of stale whiskey and wet wool filled my nose. His grip was tight, his thumb pressing right on the bone. All the air left my lungs. It wasn't Rick holding me. It was Eli. It was the hand that used to grab my arm and drag me from a room, the fingers that would dig into my shoulder, the voice whispering, "You're making a scene. You always make a scene." "Let go," I whispered, pulling back, but my voice was pathetic, trapped. Don't be like that." A shadow fell over us. I hadn't heard him move, not a sound on the tile, not the creak of the booth, but suddenly, Dario Moretti was standing right behind Rick. He didn't say a word. He didn't touch Rick. He just looked. He looked at Rick's hand on my wrist. His face was perfectly calm, his dark eyes flat, empty of everything except a cold, bottomless authority. He was a statue, a judge. Rick, his face flushed with booze moments before, went a sickly, pale gray. His eyes widened. He seemed to shrink, caving in on himself. He released my wrist so fast I stumbled back against the counter. I was leaving. Rick stammered, his bravado gone, replaced by a raw, animal fear. He fumbled in his pocket, threw a crumpled $5 bill on the counter, and practically ran, slipping on the wet floor as he bolted out the door. The bell chimed, mocking his retreat. The silence he left behind was heavy. The trucker in booth 1 was staring intently into his mashed potatoes. I was shaking, rubbing the red marks on my skin. I looked up at the man beside me. He was already turning, walking back to his booth as silently as he had come. My heart was hammering, a painful, frantic beat. I hated this. I hated being weak. I hated him seeing it. I grabbed the coffee pot, my hand unsteady, and walked over to his booth. I refilled his cup. My pride, the stupid, ragged thing that was all I had left, made me speak. "You didn't have to do that." He looked up. His gaze was just as steady as ever. Not kind, not cruel, just there. "I can take care of myself," I insisted, my voice sounding thin. He took a slow sip of his coffee. He held my gaze for a long moment, long enough for me to feel the heat rising in my face. Then, he said, "I know." Just those 2 words, "I know." It wasn't an agreement. It wasn't an argument. It was a statement. He wasn't dismissing my claim. He was acknowledging it. And yet, he had still intervened. It confused me. It knocked me off balance more than Rick's assault had. I just nodded, turned, and went back behind the counter, my skin prickling. His grip, the smell of whiskey, the sudden paralyzing fear, it brought Eli back, flooding the diner, drowning out the smell of coffee and the sound of the rain. I had met Eli when I was 20. I was naive, working a dead-end job, and he was dazzling. He was all broad smiles and easy charm. He told me I was beautiful. He told me I was smart. He said he'd protect me from the world. He didn't, of course. He protected me from the world. First, it was my friends. They don't get you. "Lena, they're holding you back." Then it was my job. "You don't need to work. I can take care of you." I moved into his apartment. It felt like a castle at first. Then I realized the doors only locked from the outside. He picked my clothes. He checked my phone. He'd get angry if I talked to the mailman. He had a way of twisting everything until I was the one apologizing. I'm sorry. You're right. I'm just stupid." He'd chip away at me, a little piece every day, until I wasn't a person. I was his, a possession, something he'd polished and put on a shelf. Then his friends started coming around, the Cutler gang. They weren't like the man in booth 4. They weren't silent and composed. They were loud, sloppy, and violent. They were street-level thugs, all cheap leather and bragging. Eli, desperate for respect, got tangled up with them. He started doing jobs for them. He loved the fear he inspired, the power it gave him, and he loved that I was his, trapped and terrified. Last night, he hit me. A backhand. Hard enough to split my lip. It was because I'd looked at his friend wrong. That was the snap. The spell broke. While he was passed out, drunk on his own new power, I packed a small bag. I took the $43 I had hidden in a tampon box, and I walked to the bus station. I bought a ticket to the farthest place that money would get me. East Briar. I thought I'd covered my tracks. I thought I was free. But the way Rick had looked at me, the way Dario Moretti had watched, it made me realize I wasn't free. I was just hiding. My shift ended at 4 a.m. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the pavement slick and black. The air was cold, biting at my cheeks. I pulled my thin jacket tighter and walked to my car, a 1998 Civic that was more rust than metal. I stopped. My keys felt heavy in my hand. I stared. All 4 of my tires were flat, not just low, slashed. The rubber was torn open, gaping wounds in the sidewalls. The world tilted. This wasn't random. This wasn't a punk kid. This was a message. I found you. My breath hitched. I couldn't breathe. The parking lot, empty moments before, suddenly felt full of shadows. Every dark corner, every parked car held him. Eli, he was here. He was watching me. I backed away from the car, my heart trying to escape my chest. I fumbled for my phone, but my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Who would I call? The police? What would I say? My ex-boyfriend I ran away from slash my tires? They wouldn't care. A pair of headlights cut through the darkness, sweeping across the lot and pinning me in their glare. I froze, a rabbit caught. A vehicle pulled up, stopping a few feet away. It wasn't Eli's beat-up truck. It was a black, gleaming SUV, the kind that costs 6 figures. The engine was a low, silent purr. The passenger window glided down. It was him, Dario Moretti. His face was cast in the dim glow of the dashboard lights. He looked at my car, at the slashed tires, and then at me. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were hard. "Get in," he said. It wasn't a request. It was a command. I flinched. All my fear of Eli pivoted and slammed into this new, immediate threat. A man with a gun under his suit, a man who owned the night. "No," I said, my voice shaking. "No, thank you." He just stared at me. "I'm fine," I lied, the words tasting like ash. "I'll call a tow truck." I was terrified of Eli, but I was just as terrified of this, of being indebted, of trading one cage for another, even if this one was gilded. "I don't need your help," I said, backing up another step. Stupid, stupid pride. Dario Moretti looked at me for a long, heavy moment. He didn't argue. He didn't try to persuade me. He just held my gaze, and I felt small, not threatened, just small and foolish, standing in the cold next to my ruined car. The window whispered shut, the SUV reversed, smooth and silent, and pulled out of the parking lot, disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness. He left me. He actually left me there. A bubble of hysterical laughter and tears rose in my throat. I'd told him to go, and he'd gone. I was alone. I walked the 3 miles back to my apartment, my shoes soaked, my whole body trembling with cold and fear. Every car that passed made me jump. Every shadow was Eli. The next night, I took the bus to work. My car was gone. I panicked, thinking Eli had had it towed, destroyed. I ran inside. Sal was at the counter, reading the paper. "Sal, my car, it's—" "Oh, yeah," he said, not looking up. "A tow truck came for it this afternoon. Guy left this for you." He slid a piece of paper across the counter. It was a receipt from an auto body shop on the other side of town, a place I'd never even heard of. The receipt listed 4 new tires, balanced and mounted. At the bottom, a stamp, paid in full. I stared at it. Who paid for this? Sal shrugged. "Don't know. Guy just dropped it off. Said your car would be delivered back here tomorrow. Man of few words." I knew. Of course, I knew. He had left me in the parking lot because I'd told him to, and then he fixed my car anyway. The sheer, stubborn arrogance of it made me furious and confused, and something else, something warm and dangerous that I refused to name. When I got home that morning, staggering with exhaustion, I saw it. A plain white envelope slid under the cracked wood of my apartment door. My blood went cold. Eli. He knew where I lived. This was it, a threat, a taunt. I nudged it with my foot, then snatched it up, my hands trembling. I tore it open, expecting a note full of his poison, his promises and his threats. It wasn't a note. It was a key, a single, heavy key attached to a black plastic security fob. With it was a small, thick card, the kind used for business. There was no name, no number, just a few words, written in neat, strong block handwriting. No strings, safe place. You don't have to stay. Below the words was an address, the residences at Arbor Hill. I knew the building. Everyone did. It was the new glass and steel luxury high-rise downtown, the one with doormen and a private garage, the fanciest, safest building in all of East Briar. I slid down the wall, my back hitting the peeling paint. I sat on the cold, damp linoleum floor of my tiny basement apartment, the key heavy in my palm. This was from him, Dario Moretti, the man who watched, the man who said, "I know." He wasn't offering help. He was just giving it a safe place, no strings. I pressed my face into my knees, the key fob digging into my hand, and for the first time in months, I cried. I cried for my stupid, broken-down car. I cried for my slashed tires. I cried because I was so tired of being afraid. And I cried because a dangerous man I didn't know had offered me kindness. And it terrified me more than Eli's cruelty ever had. Cruelty was familiar. I knew how to survive it. I didn't know how to survive this. The key was a solid weight in my pocket, a cold piece of metal that felt heavier than a brick. I'd spent the rest of the morning after my shift just staring at it, lying on the stained floral comforter of my lumpy bed. Arbor Hill, a safe place. The words echoed in my head, a counter rhythm to the frantic pounding of my heart. Eli was here. Eli had found me. He'd slashed my tires as a warning, a prelude. He was reminding me that I was his, that he could touch me, that my little life here was a joke he was about to end. And on the other hand, a mafia boss had given me the keys to a fortress. Pride is a luxury for people who aren't being hunted, but it was all I had, accepting this apartment, this charity from a man like Dario Moretti. It felt like giving up the last tiny piece of myself that was still mine. It felt like walking from one cage into another, this one just bigger, with a better view. But I had to see it. I had to know. I took the bus downtown. I felt ridiculous, standing in front of the gleaming glass and steel tower, my frayed coat clutched around me, my hair still damp and smelling faintly of diner grease. A doorman in a heavy wool coat, looking more polished than any man I'd ever known besides Dario, gave me a look, not unkind, but assessing. I must have looked like a stray dog. I held up the black security fob. I have a key. His expression didn't change, but he stepped back and held the heavy glass door open for me. "Go right up, miss." Miss, and he was expecting me. My stomach did a sick little flip. The lobby was silent, all marble floors and recessed lighting. It smelled like money and clean air. The elevator was silent, too, whisking me upward with a smooth, soundless speed. My ears popped. The display read 22. The hallway was carpeted in a thick, dark gray plush that swallowed the sound of my worn-out boots. I found the apartment, 22B. My hand, the one holding the key, was shaking. I put the key in the lock. It turned, a heavy, expensive click. I pushed the door open. The first thing that hit me was the light. The entire far wall was glass, a floor-to-ceiling window that looked out over all of East Briar, the city I'd only ever seen from the gutter level. The city I hid from was laid out below me like a map. The apartment was huge. The floors were dark, polished wood. The kitchen to my left was all stainless steel and dark stone, bigger than my entire basement hovel. The living area was vast and empty. Save for a single black leather sofa, it was sterile, impersonal, and breathtaking. This wasn't a home. It was a statement. I walked to the window. I could see the river, the bridges, the cluster of old brick buildings I lived in, looking small and pathetic from up here. He bought me this, a man I'd served coffee to for 2 weeks. I backed away. I couldn't breathe. This was too much. This wasn't help, it was ownership. This was a bill I could never, ever pay. Eli had owned me with threats and cheap charm. Dario Moretti was trying to own me with silence and overwhelming, impossible gestures. I turned, ran out of the apartment, and locked the door behind me. I didn't take the elevator. I found the stairwell and ran down all 22 flights. My footsteps echoing in the concrete shaft, I burst out onto the street, gulping in the cold, dirty city air. I went back to the basement. I threw the key on the dresser. I would not stay there. That night, my car was back. It was parked in its usual spot when I left for my shift. The 4 new tires gleamed, black and perfect. It was cleaner than I'd ever seen it. Someone had washed it. I stood there for a long time, just looking at it, this tangible proof of his interference. He'd fixed my car. He'd given me an apartment, and he had not asked for a single thing. This was the part I couldn't understand. When 2:15 rolled around, my nerves were raw. The diner bell chimed, and he walked in. Same suit, same impossible stillness. He slid into booth 4. I felt my hands start to sweat. What did I say? Thanks for the apartment I ran from? Thanks for the tires? I grabbed the coffee pot and walked over. My hand was shaking so badly I almost missed the cup. Coffee, I said, my voice a strained croak. He just looked at me. His eyes were dark, his face impossible to read. The silence stretched, filled only by the hiss of the grill and the low murmur of the 2 truckers in the next booth. He didn't mention the car. He didn't mention the key. He nodded very slightly, toward my hand. Your wrist, he said. His voice was so low I barely heard it. I looked down. The ugly, yellowish-purple bruise from where Rick had grabbed me was still visible, a faint stain on my skin. I instinctively pulled my sleeve down over it. It's nothing, I said, the lie coming smooth and fast, a reflex honed by 2 years with Eli. I'm clumsy. I banged it on the ice machine. Dario Moretti watched me. He didn't blink. He didn't call me a liar. He just held my gaze, and in his silence, I felt the pathetic weakness of my lie. He knew I was lying. He knew I was scared. He knew I had lied to protect the man who hurt me, and I was lying to him now for the same reason, because it's what I knew how to do. He took a slow sip of his coffee. That was it, and he didn't press, and he didn't offer sympathy. He just observed. I fled back to the counter, my skin on fire. His knowing silence was 1,000 times worse than an accusation. I couldn't sleep when I got home. The basement apartment, my only sanctuary, now felt like a trap. Eli knew where I worked. He'd slash my tires. How long until he figured out where I lived? This flimsy door, this ground floor window. I sat on my bed, the key to Arbor Hill in my hand. I stared at it. No strings. Safe place. You don't have to stay. I drifted into a toxic, restless sleep, my clothes still on, and the nightmares came. It started with the sound of banging. Not a knock, a fist, bam, 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 pounding on my apartment door, shaking the whole frame. I was in the dream, backing away, my hands over my ears. Go away, I was screaming, but no sound came out. Lena! Eli's voice, muffled but full of that familiar, terrifying rage. Open the door! You stupid! You think you can hide from me? Bam! The wood of the door splintered. The cheap lock gave way. He was there, filling the doorway. His eyes were wild, his face red. He was smiling, that awful smile he always had when he knew he'd won, when he knew I was terrified. There you are, he whispered, and he reached for me. I screamed, a real, raw sound that tore from my throat. But a shadow moved. A man stepped between us. It was Dario. He was just there, in his dark suit, his hands loose at his sides. He wasn't armed, he wasn't posturing, he was just a wall, silent, solid, unmovable. Eli, for all his rage, stopped. He looked at Dario, and the triumphant madness in his eyes guttered, replaced by something else, confusion, and then fear. Eli was a bully, but this was a predator. Dario didn't even look at him. He was looking at me. I woke up with a gasp, my own scream still ringing in my ears. I was drenched in sweat. My heart was a frantic bird, slamming against my ribs. The basement was silent. The only sound was the drip, drip, drip of the leaky faucet. But the fear was real. The dream was a prophecy. Eli was coming, and this flimsy lock wouldn't even slow him down. I looked at the key on my dresser. Just for one night. The words were a prayer. Just for tonight. Just to get some sleep. Just to be behind a door that wouldn't splinter. I grabbed my backpack, shoved my few belongings inside, and ran. This time, when I got to Arbor Hill, I looked like the disaster I was. It was almost 5 a.m, my face pale and tear-streaked, my hair a mess. The night doorman, an older, kinder-looking man, just gave me a sympathetic nod. "He said you might be by," he said gently. "Apartment 22B. Welcome home, miss." Welcome home. The words almost broke me. I rode the elevator up, my backpack heavy on my shoulders. I let myself into the apartment. The lights were on, dim, soft, warm lamps. It wasn't empty. I dropped my bag. The black leather sofa was still there, but in front of it was a coffee table. On the floor was a plush, soft rug. I walked toward the kitchen, drawn by a hum, the fridge. I opened it. It was full. Milk, eggs, butter, orange juice, a container of fresh-cut fruit, a bottle of white wine. On the counter, bags from a high-end grocer, bread, pasta, cereal. I walked, numb, into the bedroom. The bed was made, piled high with soft pillows and a thick and down comforter, and on top of it, several shopping bags from an expensive department store. I opened one. A set of gray pajamas, made of a fabric softer than anything I'd ever touched. I opened another, jeans, a stack of simple, soft t-shirts, 3 sweaters, one a deep, beautiful blue, a pair of new sneakers, underwear, socks. I looked at the tag on the jeans. They were my size. He knew my size, and he'd looked at me, in my baggy waitress uniform, and he had known my size. I stumbled back into the kitchen, my mind reeling. This wasn't a gift. This was an occupation. And then I saw it. Next to the brand new, expensive coffee machine, there was a bag of coffee beans. It was the French roast blend from the diner, the one I'd recommended to a customer 3 days ago, mentioning quietly that it was my personal favorite. He heard me. He was in booth 4, across the diner, and he had heard me. This was too much. The car, the apartment. This was different. This was intimate. This was an act of terrifying, specific care. All the fight went out of me. The adrenaline from the nightmare, the stubborn pride, the fear. It all evaporated, leaving me empty. I slid down the smooth kitchen cabinets until I was sitting on the polished hardwood floor. I put my head in my hands and I wept. I wept for the girl I used to be, for the woman I'd become. I wept for Eli's cruelty, and I wept for Dario's confusing, overwhelming, impossible kindness. I don't know how long I sat there. The sun was starting to tint the windows, turning the sky from black to a deep, bruised purple. A soft chime, not the doorbell, the elevator. Then a key in the lock. I scrambled to my feet, wiping my face, my heart leaping into my throat. The door opened, and he was there. Dario. He was in his suit, as always, but his tie was loosened, his jacket unbuttoned. He looked tired. Noticed in passing tired, but deep to the bone exhausted. He stopped when he saw me, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. I was just... He held up a small, black plastic square. I was dropping this off, a security device, for the foyer table. He clearly hadn't expected me to be here. He hadn't expected to find me, a mess, in the middle of his kitchen at dawn. "You knew," I whispered, my voice thick from crying. "You knew I'd come." He didn't deny it. He just watched me. "The clothes," I said, gesturing wildly. "The food, the coffee, why?" I needed something to do with my hands. I saw the kettle, I filled it, my hands shaking. I was making tea. Why was I making tea for a mafia boss in a stranger's apartment? He walked further into the room, placing the black square on the stone countertop. "It's a panic button," he said, his voice calm, ignoring my outburst. "You press it, and my security team is here in 2 minutes. It also alerts my personal phone. No one else's." I found tea bags. Chamomile, of course. I handed him a mug. He took it. His fingers, long and clean, brushed mine. I flinched, just slightly. He noticed. We stood there, in the enormous, beautiful kitchen. The silence heavy between us. The kettle whistled. I poured the water. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, the question tearing out of me. I had to know. I had to understand the rules of this new cage. He looked down into his mug, at the tea bag floating. He seemed to be considering the question. Then he looked up, and his eyes met mine. They were so dark, so deep, I felt like I was falling into them. "Because I can." The answer hit me like a slap, so simple, so arrogant, so cold. It wasn't about me. It wasn't kindness. It was power. He did it because he was powerful, and I was weak. I was a project, a stray he could shelter. "That's it?" I whispered, the fight coming back, hot and bitter. "Because you can? Like you'd buy a new car or a painting?" "No," he said, and his voice was softer now, almost gentle. "Not like that." The air between us felt charged, thick. He was too close. He smelled like expensive wool, clean air, and something uniquely him, a faint trace of sandalwood. He lifted his hand. It moved slowly, not fast enough to startle. He was reaching for me. He was going to brush a strand of hair, still damp with sweat and tears, from my cheek. It was a gesture of comfort, a simple, kind touch. I recoiled. I didn't just lean back. I flinched, a violent, full-body jerk, slamming my back hard against the refrigerator. My hand flew up to my chest, as if to ward off a blow. It was Eli's hand I saw, Eli's touch, which always started soft before it turned hard. "Don't touch me. Don't touch me." Dario's hand froze in the air, inches from my face. His expression, usually so placid, shattered. I saw a flicker of something cold and dark, but it wasn't anger at me. It was angering me. He saw it. He saw the damage. He saw the reflex of a woman who expected a hand to be a threat. He dropped his arm to his side. He took a single, deliberate step back, giving me space. I'm sorry," I stammered, my face burning with shame. It's too much. It's too fast." He just nodded. Once, he understood. Wasn't pushing. He turned and walked to the door. He placed his mug, untouched, on a side table. He paused, his hand on the doorknob. He looked back at me, a small, trembling, broken thing in his vast, safe apartment. "You don't owe me anything, Lena," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Not for the car, not for this, not for anything." He opened the door and was gone. The next day, I woke up to silence. I had slept for 10 straight hours. I'd slept in the soft gray pajamas, in the quiet, safe bedroom, behind the heavy, locked door. I'd slept without nightmares. I felt human. I took a shower. The water was hot, the pressure immense. I used the shampoo that was already there. I got out and looked at the clothes he'd bought. I put on a simple, dark green wool dress. It fit like it was made for me. I felt like an imposter, a princess in a tower. But I also felt safe. I was in the living room, just staring out the window, when I heard the key in the door. This time, I didn't jump. I just turned. Dario was standing there. He was on his phone. his back to me. He sounded angry. "I don't care what Cutler wants," he said, his voice low and sharp. "The answer is no. You tell him that, and you tell him to stay out of my business." He snapped the phone shut, a muscle working in his jaw. He was agitated, stressed. He turned, and he hadn't seen me yet. "Lena," he started, striding into the room. "We need to discuss a potential threat. I don't think you're safe at the diner anymore." He looked up, and he saw me. He stopped, mid-stride. He wasn't looking at the terrified waitress from the diner. He wasn't looking at the crying, broken girl from the kitchen floor. He was looking at me, standing in the sunlight, in the dress he'd chosen. His gaze was heavy. It started at my face, my clean hair, and traveled down the line of my throat to the green dress and then back up. His eyes, usually so calm or cold, were warm, intense. It wasn't a leer. It was a look of appreciation, of possession, of something deep and powerful that he usually kept locked down. I felt a blush crawl up my neck, but I didn't look away. I couldn't. He didn't say, "You look beautiful." He didn't have to. The word was there, hanging in the air between us. He cleared his throat, pulling himself back, but the damage was done. "Lena," he said again, his voice rougher this time. Something had changed. The air in the room was different. He knew it. I knew it. The quiet war for my safety had just become something else entirely, and it was 1,000 times more dangerous. For 3 days, I lived in the sky. I woke up not to the smell of mildew and the sound of my upstairs neighbors' arguments, but to the silent, golden light of the sun hitting the 22nd floor. I showered in a bathroom that looked like a magazine, the water scalding hot and endless. I drank the French roast coffee from the bag he had left, the bag he'd known I loved. I wore the soft, perfect-fitting clothes. I was a ghost, a very well-dressed ghost, haunting a life that was not mine. I didn't go out. He didn't come by. The silence was as vast and clean as the apartment. The only contact was a text message I received the first morning, from a number I didn't recognize. My driver, Tony, is in a black SUV downstairs at all times. If you need anything, the doorman will get him. Do not go out alone. It wasn't signed. It didn't need to be. I didn't use the driver. I just sat on the plush sofa, looking out the window at the city below, and waited. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the trick to be revealed, for the bill to come due. Eli had trained me to live in a state of constant, low-grade terror, always anticipating the next crisis, the next twist of his mood. He had taught me that I deserved nothing but the anxiety he created. This new quiet, this absolute safety, felt wrong. It felt like a lie. It was too easy. The guilt was a heavy, physical weight in my chest. I was a fraud, eating his food, wearing his clothes, hiding in his fortress. I was the girl from the diner, the girl from the basement. I didn't deserve any of this. On the 4th day, my old phone buzzed. I kept it in my bag, a toxic habit. I should have thrown it away, but it was the only phone I'd had for 2 years. My new, expensive phone Dario had left on the counter was for him, the old one was for Eli. It buzzed on the coffee table, a nasty, scraping sound, a text from a number I didn't recognize. My blood turned to ice. I knew. I stared at it. It buzzed again. Slowly, I picked it up. The first message, "Miss me?" My heart stopped, just stopped. I couldn't get a breath. The second message, "You look good in his tower. Real classy." I scrambled off the sofa, stumbling, and ran to the window. I looked down at the street, 22 floors below. Tiny cars. Tiny people. He wasn't there. He couldn't be. The phone buzzed again. A picture. I almost dropped it. It was me from behind, walking in my diner uniform. It was taken from across the street, through the window of the crossroads. It was dated, from before he slashed my tires. He had been watching me for weeks. Another buzz. This one's better. It was me, walking into the gleaming lobby of Arbor Hill, taken from a car, taken yesterday. He was here, and he was outside, and he knew where I lived. My legs gave out and I slid to the floor, my back against the cold glass, the city spread out behind me like a cruel joke. The phone buzzed. You think he can protect you from me? He doesn't even know what I am. And then, the whiplash, the text that I knew was coming, the one that had always worked. I'm sorry, baby. I just miss you. It's his fault. He's poisoning you against me. Come home. Let me take care of you. I started to shake. The threats, the apologies, the poison. It was his signature. I looked around the vast, empty, silent apartment. I was safe. I was protected, and I had never in my entire life felt more like a target. I don't know if I screamed, but I hit the panic button. I didn't even realize I'd done it. I was just staring at my phone, shaking, and then I realized my fist was pressed against the black plastic square on the entry table. I heard the ding of the elevator, the sound of a key. The door burst open. It wasn't Dario. It was two men I'd never seen. They were huge, dressed in the same dark suits as Dario, and they moved with a terrifying, fluid grace. They had guns in their hands, held low, pointed at the floor. Miss Vancy, the first one said, his eyes scanning the entire apartment in a split second. Are you all right? Is anyone here? I was still on the floor. I couldn't speak. The second man, with dark hair and a scar on his chin, spoke into a cufflink. Marco, she's here. She's alone. She looks terrified. He moved toward me, but slowly. Miss, did he get in? My phone, I stammered, holding it up. The elevator chimed again. Dario was there. He wasn't calm. He wasn't the quiet observer from the diner. His face was a thundercloud. He wasn't even breathing hard. He just looked like he had materialized out of pure, cold fury. He saw me, a pathetic heap on the floor, and he saw the two men. Show me, he said. His voice was a low command. He crossed the room in 2 strides, pulling me to my feet like I weighed nothing. I was still shaking so hard I could barely stand. Show me, he repeated, his gaze locked on my old phone. I gave it to him. He read the texts. I watched his face. He didn't react. He just went still. It was the stillness of a bomb before it went off. The air in the room became heavy, hard to breathe. He handed the phone to the man named Marco. Find him, he said. It was the quietest, most terrifying command I'd ever heard. He's Cutler's, I whispered, the words tumbling out. He's with the Cutler gang. Dario's dark eyes snapped to mine. That was the one piece of information I had that he did not. His jaw tightened. He looked at Marco. Full security protocol. Now, sweep the building. Check the garage. I want eyes on every camera from here to her old neighborhood. She doesn't leave this apartment. Not for anything. Marco just nodded and the two men were gone, the door closing with a heavy, final click. I was alone with him. He was pacing, his phone to his ear, snapping orders in Italian. His voice was hard, a staccato rhythm of commands. I had never seen him like this. This was not the man who bought me coffee. This was not the man who said, I know. This was the boss. This was the Mafia. He snapped his phone shut, the sound like a gunshot in the silent room. He turned to me, his eyes burning. You will have full-time protection, he stated. It wasn't a suggestion. A man outside this door, 24 hours a day. Tony will drive you, if you need to go somewhere, which you will not. You will not go anywhere alone. Am I clear? The order, the command, it broke something. The fear and the guilt and the shame all erupted at once. No, I whispered. He stopped. He looked at me as if I'd just spoken in a foreign language. No? No, I said, stronger, though I was trembling. I can't, I won't, all of this. I don't deserve this. The old, familiar words, my mantra of self-hatred. This is my fault, I said, the tears coming hot and fast. Eli is my problem. I'm bringing this to you. I'm putting you in danger. I'm not your responsibility, Dario. I expected him to be cold. I expected him to agree. He snapped. He didn't yell. He didn't move. But his voice, when it came, was like a whip. "You keep saying that." I flinched. The words were low, vibrating with a rage so profound it shook me. "You keep saying I don't deserve it, like it's a virtue, like it's a choice." He took a step toward me. "You think you deserve him. You think you deserve to be hunted, to hide in a basement, to get texts that make you shake so hard you can't stand." He was in front of me now, close, too close. He was radiating heat and fury. "Your ex-boyfriend is a dog for the Cutler gang," he snarled. "He's not just a jealous ex. Lena, he's a pawn, and they know you're here. They're using him to get to me. This stopped being about your problem the second he slashed your tires." I was crying, shaking my head. "I'm sorry, I'm a problem." "You keep saying that it's your choice to be alone," he finally roared, the sound echoing in the huge, empty room. "It's not—" The silence that followed his outburst was deafening. He was breathing hard, his chest rising and falling under the fine wool of his suit. He was at war with himself, his fists clenched at his sides. He was furious. Not at me. He was furious for me. He was furious at Eli, at Cutler, and at the trauma that made me believe I was worthless. I couldn't take it. I turned and fled. I ran to the kitchen, the only place I felt I had any purpose. A refugee in my own gilded cage. I needed to do something with my hands. I grabbed a mug from the drainer, the one he had used that morning. I turned on the water, hot, and just stood there, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the cup. I heard him follow me. I could feel his presence, a solid wall of heat and anger and him. He stood in the kitchen doorway, just watching me tremble. "Lena?" I shook my head, my back to him, the water still running. "I'm sorry. I'm a mess. I'm bringing this all on you. You should just let me go. I'll leave. I'll disappear. Eli will never find me." "Stop." He was behind me, so close I could feel the heat of his body. His hand, warm and heavy, settled on my waist, just one hand. I froze. My entire body went rigid, the flinch, the automatic, terrified response to a man's touch in a moment of tension. But he didn't pull away. He didn't grab it. He just held me. His thumb stroked, just once, a slow, grounding circle over the fabric of the dress. "You are not a problem," he whispered, his voice rough, right next to my ear. I turned off the water. The silence was absolute. Slowly, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would break my ribs, I turned around. He was so close. I had to tilt my head all the way back to look at him. His eyes were black, his pupils blown, and he was staring at my mouth. "Don't," I whispered, but my body betrayed me, leaning into his warmth. I didn't mean it. "I have to," he breathed. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't slow. He didn't ask permission. He crashed. His other hand came up, burying itself in my hair, tilting my head back. His mouth was on mine. It wasn't a kiss. It was a claim. It was a possession. It was all the frustration, all the anger, all the protective, territorial rage of the last few weeks, released in one desperate, consuming press. It was hot, tense, and utterly unexpected. He wasn't asking me. He was telling me. He was telling me I wasn't alone. He was telling me I was his to protect. I was paralyzed, just for a second, held captive by the force of it. But then he groaned, a low, rough sound from deep in his chest, and his mouth softened, just a fraction, moving against mine. And I kissed him back. My hands, which had been frozen at my sides, flew up and grabbed the front of his suit jacket, my fingers twisting in the expensive fabric, holding on for dear life. I kissed him back with all the fear, all the loneliness, and all the terrible, aching need I had been hiding for years. He was the one who pulled back, but only an inch. His forehead rested against mine. We were both breathing like we had run a marathon. Mine. He grows, his voice wrecked. You are mine to protect. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed, alone. For a moment, I thought I'd dreamed it. The fight, the texts, the kiss. But my lips were still tender, still swollen. I walked out into the living room. The apartment was silent. Then I smelled it, coffee. He was in the kitchen. His suit jacket was gone. His tie was gone, and his white shirt sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, showing strong, tanned forearms. He was making coffee with the French press. He looked up when I entered. His face was calm, the storm from last night gone. He wasn't tense. He wasn't angry. He just looked solid. "Good morning, Lena," he said, his voice quiet, as if this was the most normal thing in the world. He poured a cup, black, and handed it to me. I took it. Our fingers brushed. This time I didn't flinch. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. Not really. Not in a way that reached my eyes. I smiled, a small, real, genuine smile. He saw it, and his entire face softened. He didn't smile back, not a full smile, but his eyes did. For a few days, there was peace, a strange, armed peace. Marco, the man with the scar, sat on a chair outside my apartment door. He was silent, but he was always there. Dario came by in the mornings, with coffee, and in the evenings, for dinner. We didn't talk about the kiss. We didn't talk about Eli. We just existed. But the guilt was eating me alive. I was safe. I was protected. And I felt like Lena Vance was disappearing. I was being erased, replaced by this woman in new clothes who lived in a tower. I had left things in that basement. Stupid things. A small, framed picture of my mother, a box of books, the last pieces of the girl I was before Eli. I needed them. I needed to prove to myself that I still existed. I couldn't ask Dario. He would send Marco or Tony. He would say it was too dangerous. He would be right. I had to go myself. I waited until the afternoon shift changed. Marco was replaced by a younger man named Leo. I lied. I told Leo I desperately needed feminine products from the pharmacy on the corner. I must have looked pathetic and embarrassed because he turned red. "I'll get Tony," he said, fumbling for his radio. No, I said, waving my hands. It's personal. It's just right there. I'll be 5 minutes, please." He hesitated. I ran. I didn't go to the pharmacy. I ran down the street, my heart pounding, and hailed a cab. I gave him my old address. The basement apartment building looked pathetic in the daylight. I fumbled with my old key, my hands shaking. The apartment was cold, damp, and smelled of my fear. I grabbed my small box of things, the picture of my mom on top. I felt stupid. I was so stupid. I got out of the building and started walking, looking for another cab. That's when I saw it, a black sedan parked across the street, not one of Dario's SUVs, just a plain, dark car with tinted windows. It started moving, pacing me. My blood ran cold. I turned right. It turned right. I turned left into an alley, and I started to run. I heard a car door slam, footsteps. There she is. Get her. I ran. I dropped my box. I heard the glass of my mother's picture frame shatter on the pavement. I didn't stop. I was sobbing, my lungs on fire. I knew these alleys. I cut through a gap in a chain-link fence. I burst out onto another street, and I saw it. The Shamrock, an old Irish bar boarded up for years. The front door was ajar, hanging off one hinge. I slipped inside. It was pitch black. It smelled of stale beer, rats, and decay. I ran to the back, feeling my way along the sticky bar, the bathrooms. I locked myself in a stall, the door so rotten I could have pushed it over. I sank to the filthy floor, gasping, crying so hard I couldn't breathe. I was stupid. I was so stupid. I had left him. I had left safety. I pulled out the new phone, the one he had given me. His number was the only one in it, programmed as 1 inch on the speed dial. He answered on the first ring. "Lena, what's wrong? Leo said you..." I'm sorry, I sobbed, my voice a broken thing. Dario, I'm so sorry. I left. I lied. I went to my old place, and they followed me. A black car. I'm so scared. Where are you? His voice wasn't calm. It was ice. It was a razor. Tell me exactly where you are, Lena. I'm in a bar, the Shamrock. On 5th and Miller, in the bathroom, I'm hiding in a stall. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have left. Stay there, he commanded. Do not move. Do not make a sound. I'm coming. He hung up. I don't know how long I waited. It might have been 5 minutes. It felt like 5 years. I huddled on the floor, my hands over my mouth, trying to muffle my sobs. I heard the front door of the bar crash open, slamming against the wall. Lena! It was his voice, raw, terrified, and furious. Dario! I burst out of the stall, tripping over my own feet. I'm here. He was there, framed in the doorway, a silhouette against the bright, outside light. He was alone. He must have broken every speed limit in the city. I ran to him. I slammed into his chest so hard it's a miracle we both didn't fall. His arms came around me, crushing me to him. It wasn't a gentle hug. It was an anchor, a cage, a shield. He held me so tight I couldn't breathe. His hand tangled in my hair, holding my head against his chest. He was shaking. Or maybe I was. You're okay, he was whispering, his voice rough with a fear I had never heard in him. You're safe. I've got you. You're safe. He just held me in the doorway of that abandoned, filthy bar, letting me cry. He stroked my back, his hand shaking. Finally, he pulled back, just enough to look at my face. His thumb, surprisingly gentle, wiped a tear from my cheek. His expression was a storm of raw relief and a fury so deep it scared me. You're not running anymore, he promised, and it wasn't a comfort, it was a vow. Not from them, and not from me. Never again. He kissed my forehead, hard, a mark of ownership, and then he was pulling me out of the darkness, shielding me with his body, and leading me back to the light. My escape and the subsequent chase had changed everything. The game was over. The city of East Briar, which I had only ever seen from the diner window or the bus, felt like it was holding its breath. I heard it in the quiet conversations between Dario and Marco when they thought I wasn't listening. Words like shipments, territory, and cutler were spoken in low, tense tones. The papers Dario left on the coffee table were filled with coded language about a rival shipping company, aggressively moving into the docks. I didn't need a translator. Cutler was pushing, and he was using my presence, my connection to Dario, as an excuse to start a war. And I was a prisoner. But this time, I was willing one. The terror of that afternoon in the boarded-up bar, the raw, primal fear of Eli's men hunting me, had shattered the last of my stupid pride. I had run from safety, and Dario had run into danger to get me. I would not make that mistake again. I was placed under house protection. This wasn't the subtle, silent observation from before. This was a full-scale operation. Marco, Dario's right-hand man, was a constant, solid presence. He had a scar that ran from his temple to his chin, but his eyes were surprisingly kind when he looked at me. He was the one who explained the new rules. Leo is outside the apartment door, always, he said, his voice a gravelly baritone. Tony is in the garage. No one enters this building without my direct approval. You don't go near the windows. Lena, not until we handle this. I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. I was shaken, but it was a different kind of fear. It wasn't the lonely, isolating terror Eli had inspired. This was a shared fear, a heavy blanket that covered the entire apartment, and in a strange way, it made me feel less alone. I was no longer just a victim. I was part of their crisis. Dario was different. The night he'd brought me back from the bar, he hadn't left my side. He'd sat in a chair in the living room, watching me as I sat on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, still trembling. He didn't speak for hours. He just watched. Not like he did in the diner. This was a raw, proprietary guard. He was a wolf, and I was the thing he had decided to protect. Now, he was consumed by the threat. He was on the phone constantly, the rapid-fire Italian I didn't understand sounding harder, sharper. His meetings with Marco and others were frequent, held in the study I wasn't allowed to enter. But every night, he came back to me. He would walk into the apartment, his face a mask of exhaustion and stress. He'd loosen his tie, shrug off his suit jacket, and for a moment, he wouldn't be the boss. He'd just be a man, carrying a weight I couldn't comprehend. We ate dinner in silence, the tension in the air so thick I felt I could choke on it. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. He was standing at the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the city lights. He was breaking his own rule, standing by the glass, but I knew he didn't care. He was daring them. "You should move," I whispered from the sofa. "Marco said not to stand there." "They won't get a shot this high," he said, his voice flat. "Not without a level of skill Cutler doesn't possess." He sounded so tired, so certain. "Why?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. "Why didn't you just let me go? The first night, the tires. You could have just let me be. It would have been easier for you." He turned from the window. The city lights cast his face in shadow, all hard angles and dark hollows. "Easier," he repeated, like the word was foreign. "Maybe." "This is all my fault," I said, the familiar, bitter guilt rising. "This war with Cutler, the danger, it's because of me. It's because of what I am, what I was, with him." "Stop," he commanded, his voice low. "No," I said, and I was surprised to find I was standing, my hands clenched. "You don't understand. You don't know why I stayed. You think I'm just weak. You think he was just bad." "Lena," he said, a warning in his voice. "I stayed because he told me I was nothing without him," I said, the words spilling out, hot and shameful. "I stayed because he broke me. Not with his fists, not at first. He isolated me. He told me my friends were stupid. He told me my family didn't love me. He told me I was crazy, that I was too emotional, that I was lucky to have him." I was crying, the tears streaming down my face, but I couldn't stop. I had to make him see. I had to make him understand the rot I was carrying. He would lock me in the apartment, not with a key, just with words. He'd say, "Go ahead, leave, no one wants you. You'll be on the street in a day." And I believed him. I believed him because he had spent a year making it true. And when he finally hit me, do you know what I thought? Dario was still, a statue carved from shadow. He hadn't moved. He was just listening. I thought I deserved it, I whispered, the confession tearing my throat. I thought, he's right. I'm worthless. I'm stupid. I made him do this. I stayed because I didn't think there was anywhere else to go. I didn't think I deserved to be safe. The silence in the room was absolute. I was sobbing now, my whole body shaking with the force of the confession, the shame so heavy I could barely stand. I had never said those words aloud. I waited for him to turn away, to look at me with disgust, to finally see the pathetic, broken thing I really was. Eli had always told me that if anyone knew the real me, they would run. Dario moved. He crossed the room. He didn't stop until he was standing in front of me, so close I could feel the heat radiating from his chest. He didn't speak. He just lifted his hands, his thumbs impossibly gentle, and brushed the tears from my cheeks. I flinched at the contact, my breath hitching. He paused. His hands were warm, his touch firm but soft. He wasn't judging me. He wasn't pitying me. He was just there. He was listening. He was seeing the ugliest, most broken part of me, and he hadn't run. "He was wrong," Dario said, his voice a low, rough whisper. He wiped another tear. "He was wrong about all of it, Lena." And then I was in his arms. I don't know who moved first. I just fell. I collapsed against his chest, my hands grabbing his shirt, and I wept. I wept for the girl Eli had destroyed. He just held me. His arms were steel bands around me, one hand cradling the back of my head, his fingers tangled in my hair. He didn't shush me. He didn't offer platitudes. He just held me, absorbing the storm, a solid, unmovable anchor in my world of pain. "You're not that girl anymore," he whispered into my hair, his voice vibrating against my skin. "He will never touch you again. I will burn this city to the ground before he lays a hand on you." We stood like that for a long time. The storm of my confession passed, leaving me empty and exhausted, but lighter. The shame, which I had carried alone, was now shared. He had taken it, and he had not buckled. He guided me to the sofa. We sat, and he didn't let me go. I was curled against his side, my head on his chest, listening to the steady, powerful beat of his heart. I was so tired. "You need to sleep," he said. "I can't," I whispered. "If I close my eyes?" "You're not alone," He said. "I'm right here." He led me to the bedroom, my bedroom, the one with the big, soft bed that I had slept in alone. I got under the covers, my clothes still on, my body still trembling with the aftershocks of the breakdown. He sat on the edge of the bed, his back to me, his shoulders a mountain of tension. "Dario," I whispered. He turned. Don't leave," I said, the words costing me everything. I was so afraid of being alone. His eyes, dark and intense, searched mine. He saw the fear. He saw the need. He took off his shoes. He shut his watch and his phone, placing them on the nightstand. He didn't take off his clothes, just his suit jacket. He slid under the covers, on top of the comforter, and lay beside me. He was a foot away. We weren't touching, but the entire bed was charged with his presence. He was a furnace of heat. "Go to sleep, Lena," he murmured, his voice rough. I tried. I closed my eyes, but Eli's face was there, laughing, the men from the car, the shattered glass of my mother's picture. A sob escaped me. I felt the bed shift. His arm, heavy and warm, wrapped around my waist. He pulled me, gently, against him. He was on his side, and he tucked me against his chest, my back to his front. It was the most terrifying and the safest I had ever felt. "I've got you," he breathed, his mouth close to my ear. "Just sleep. I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time, I believed it. I sank into his warmth, into the solid wall of his chest, into the strength of the arm that held me. And I fell asleep. I woke in the deep, silent hours of the night. The room was dark. For a moment, I was disoriented. I was warm. My body was content. I was pressed against him. Sometime in the night, I had turned, and I was now facing him, my head tucked under his chin, my hand resting on his chest. Over his heart, it was beating. Slow and steady, his arm was still locked around me. He was awake. I knew it instantly. His breathing was even, but it wasn't the breathing of sleep. He was awake, and he was watching me. I tilted my head back. In the gloom, I could just make out his face. His eyes were open, and they were staring at the ceiling. "Dario?" I whispered. His gaze snapped down to mine, even in the dark. His eyes were piercing. He didn't say anything. I was so close. I could feel his breath on my forehead. I could smell the faint scent of sandalwood and clean, starched cotton. "Thank you," I said, my voice small, for listening. He just watched me. His expression was unreadable. It was painful, tender, and hungry, all at once. "Lena," he breathed, and my name was a prayer. I don't know what I was doing. I was moving. I was rising, just slightly, to press my lips to his cheek, a simple, innocent thank you. But he turned his head. My lips, meant for his cheek, met the corner of his mouth. A jolt like an electric shock went through me. I froze. He didn't move. He just stopped breathing. I could have pulled away. I should have. It was the safe thing to do, the smart thing. I didn't. I stayed there, my lips barely brushing his, in the dark, warm, silent room. He made a sound, a low, guttural sound, deep in his chest. It was the sound of a man holding on by a thread. And then his hand, the one that wasn't wrapped around me, came up. It cupped my face. His thumb, calloused and rough, stroked my jaw. It was a question. It was a plea. I leaned into his touch. That was all the answer he needed. He kissed me. It was not the desperate, angry claiming in the kitchen. It was not the territorial promise at the bar. This was slow. It was deep. It was shattering. His mouth was so soft, so gentle. It was a kiss of exploration, of reverence. He was tasting me, learning me. He was communicating all the things he couldn't say, that he saw me, that he cared for me, that he was undone by me. I whimpered, my hand clutching his shirt. He pulled me closer, if that was even possible. He rolled just slightly until he was more over me, and the kiss deepened. It was still slow, but it was consuming. There was no rush, there was no goal. There was just this. His lips left mine, trailing a line of fire down my jaw to the sensitive skin of my throat. I gasped, my head falling back, my hair fanning out on the pillow. "D," I whispered, not even knowing I was saying it. He went still. He lifted his head, his face hovering above mine. He was looking at me, his eyes black holes in the darkness, and he was trembling. The powerful, unshakable Dario Moretti was trembling. "Lena," he said, his voice wrecked. We don't have to." He was giving me an out. After all my trauma, all my confessions, he was stopping. He was putting my safety, my emotional safety, above his own desire. And that was the moment I fell for him. Not in fear, not in gratitude, but in love. "Don't stop," I whispered, my voice shaking with a new kind of vulnerability. "Please, Dario, don't stop." His kiss, when it came again, was one of pure, unadulterated trust. It was a silent conversation. His hands were slow, his touch gentle. He wasn't taking. He was asking. Every brush of his fingers, every press of his lips was a question. "Is this okay?" And I answered, my body arching into his, my hands pulling him closer. Yes, yes. It was slow. It was emotionally layered. He made me feel cherished. Not used, not taken. He made me feel like I was made of glass, and he was the only man in the world who knew how to hold me without breaking me. When it was over, I was lying tangled in his arms, my body humming, my mind quiet. I trembled, a single, violent shudder, the fear, the vulnerability, the old shame. He'll see me differently now. He'll leave. He's seen the broken parts. He felt the tremor. He pulled me tighter, his arm a vice. He kissed the top of my head. "I'm still here," he whispered, his voice thick. "I'm not going anywhere." He didn't. He held me until I fell asleep, safe in his arms. The next morning, the apartment was a war room. Marco was there, his face grim. "Boss," he said, not even looking at me as I came out of the bedroom, dressed in one of Dario's shirts. "We have a problem. Cutler's using him. That ex of hers, Eli. He's been seen. He's telling everyone he's going to fix this. He's going to make a move." Dario, who had been pouring me a coffee, went still. "Marco thinks we should handle this the old way," Dario said, his back to me. "He's a rabid dog, boss," Marco growled. "You put him down. You take him off the board. It's clean." I saw Dario's shoulders tense. I knew what the old way meant. It meant an assassination. It meant blood. "No," Dario said. "Dario." "No," he repeated, turning. His eyes were hard. "I don't want blood. Not over this. Not for him. I just want her safe. We are going to end this, but we are not going to become them to do it. Find a way to stop him. Find a way to stop Cutler, but do it my way." Marco looked frustrated, but he nodded. "Your call. But he's going to try and kill someone, and he's going to use her to do it." Marco left, and the tension remained. That afternoon, Dario was getting ready to leave. "I have a meeting," he said, adjusting his cufflinks, "with a city official, a negotiation to encourage the city to put pressure on Cutler's other businesses." "A peace meeting," I said. "Something like that," he said, his face grim. "I'm coming with you." He stopped, and he looked at me. "Absolutely not. You are safer here. You are the reason he's doing this. You're a liability out there." "No," I said, my voice shaking, but firm. I walked over to him, buttoning the new dress I had put on. I'm not a weakness, Dario. I'm not something to be hidden. I am tired of being the girl in the tower. I am tired of being the reason for the war. I want them to see me. I want them to see that I am with you. I am not a weakness. I am your strength." He stared at me, his eyes wide. "I'm coming," I said again, "or you're not going." A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. It was the first time I had ever seen him smile like that. It was full of pride. "All right," he said. "Stay in the car, but you're coming." The convoy was two black, identical SUVs. I was with Dario in the back of the second one. Tony was driving. Marco was in the passenger seat. The meeting was in a quiet, downtown hotel. It lasted for an hour. I stayed in the car, my heart in my throat. Dario got back in, his face set. "It's done," he said. "He'll back off." The convoy pulled out, heading back to Arbor Hill. We were on the freeway, the city skyline rising in front of us. I reached out and took his hand. He looked surprised, but he laced his fingers with mine. That's when it happened. A loud bang. The car in front of us, the one with his other men, swerved, its tires blowing out. "Ambush!" Marco yelled. A black truck, one that had been pacing us, slammed into our side. The world exploded. The sound was a deafening roar of metal on metal. The SUV tilted, the windows shattering. I was thrown against Dario, the seatbelt cutting into my chest. We were flipping. The world was a blur of glass, metal, and screaming. We rolled once, twice. Then, silence. We were upside down. I was hanging by my seatbelt. My head was screaming. I tasted blood. "Dario?" I whispered. "Lena!" His voice panicked. "Lena, talk to me." I'm here." "Gunfire!" Marco yelled from the front. "Pop, pop, pop!" Sounds from outside. Dario was unbuckling his belt, dropping to the floor, which was the roof of the car. He was in front of me in a second, his face a mask of terror. "You're bleeding," he said, his voice shaking. He fumbled with my seatbelt. "I'm getting you out. Tony, Marco, cover us." Dario kicked the shattered side window. Clearing the glass, he unhooked me, and I fell into his arms. He was pulling me, dragging me through the broken window, out into the open air. The world was upside down. The gunfire was so loud. He pulled me from the wreckage, shielding my body with his own. He was half carrying, half dragging me toward the concrete divider. "Dario," I said, my vision blurring, He wasn't. He was fine. But his hands, holding my head, holding my body, they were covered in blood. My blood. "You're okay," he said, his voice frantic. He was pushing my hair back from my face. "You're okay. We're safe." But I was so tired. My head was so heavy. "Lena?" His face was blurry. "Lena, open your eyes. Look at me." I tried. "Don't close your eyes," he begged, his voice cracking. The boss replaced by a terrified man. "Lena, please, don't close your eyes." I couldn't help it. The world went black. I woke up to a steady beep, 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 beep. A hospital. I smelled antiseptic. My head felt like it had been split open and sewn back together. I opened my eyes. The room was dim. My arm ached. There was an IV in it. He was there. He was sitting in the visitor's chair, slumped over, his head resting on the edge of my bed, his hand clutching mine. He wasn't in a suit. He was in his shirt sleeves, the white cotton stained with dirt and my blood. His hair was a mess. He had a dark, 3-day stubble on his jaw. He looked broken. I squeezed his hand. His head shot up. His eyes were bloodshot, red-rimmed, and raw. He hadn't slept. "Lena," he breathed. My name was a sob. "Hey," I whispered. My throat was dry. Tears, actual tears, welled in his eyes. He didn't let them fall. He surged forward, his other hand coming up to cup my face, his touch so gentle I thought I'd break. "You're awake," he said, his voice hoarse. You're awake. You've been... for 2 days." 2 days. He had been here for 2 days. "You're okay," he whispered, mostly to himself. "You're okay." He leaned down and pressed his forehead to mine. His eyes squeezed shut. "You're okay." I woke up to the antiseptic smell of the hospital and a silence that was far too loud. The first day, he hadn't left. He had sat in that uncomfortable vinyl chair, his hand gripping mine, his face a mask of exhaustion and grim relief. He had stayed for 2 whole days, a silent, blood-stained guardian. He had held my hand as I drifted in and out of a medicated haze, and I had felt, for the first time, completely safe. But on the morning of the 3rd day, I woke up, and he was gone. The chair was empty. The room was sterile and bright. The steady beep of the heart monitor was the only sound. The old, familiar coldness seeped into my bones. He'd left. Of course, he'd left. The voice in my head, the one that sounded so much like Eli, sneered at me. "You're too much trouble. You're damaged. You got him into a war. Got his men hurt. Got yourself almost killed. What did you expect?" He had seen me at my worst, bloody and broken, and he had finally done the smart thing. He had walked away. The apartment, the clothes, the protection. It was all just a temporary investment, and I was a bad one. I was working myself into a full-blown panic, my heart monitor starting to beep faster, when the door opened. It was Marco. He looked just as tired as Dario had, the scar on his face a stark white against his olive skin. He was carrying a cup of coffee, which he awkwardly placed on my bedside table. "You're awake," he said. It wasn't a question. "Where is he?" I whispered, my voice a dry croak. I hated how desperate I sounded. Did he leave? Marco had the decency to look uncomfortable. He busied himself with the window blinds, adjusting them so the morning sun wasn't in my eyes. "He's busy?" Marco said, his back to me. "Busy," I repeated. The word was hollow. "So he's gone." "He's not gone," Marco said, his voice tight. He was a terrible liar. He was a soldier, not a babysitter. "Marco," I said, and my voice was stronger now, laced with the old, familiar terror that was hardening into anger. "Look at me. Where is Dario?" He turned. His eyes were dark, and he was clearly warring with himself. "He's in a meeting," he finally bit out. "A meeting?" I almost laughed. A meeting was more important than this. "A meeting with Cutler," he growled, and the anger in his own voice surprised me. My blood stopped. "What? Why? After the ambush? He's meeting with the man who tried to kill us?" "He's ending it," Marco said, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. "He's making a deal." A deal. The word hung in the air, heavy and poisoned. I remembered Dario's fury, his promise to burn the city down. It was all a lie. He was a businessman, and this was a negotiation. And I was the chip. "What kind of deal?" I asked, my voice flat, dead. Marco looked away again. "He's offering Cutler a truce. He's giving him something he wants in exchange for Cutler backing off, entirely calling off his dog. Calling off Eli. In exchange for me," I whispered. "No," Marco said, too quickly. "He's trading me," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. He's giving me back, or just trading me away? What am I, a piece of property?" "No," Marco's voice was a low roar, and he took a step toward the bed. "You don't get it. You're not the one being traded. He's giving up the South Dock." The words meant nothing to me. A dock? Marco looked at me like I was a child, his frustration boiling over. The South Dock, Lena, it's not just a dock. It's the port. It's the key to the entire East Coast. The Moretti family has controlled it for 40 years. Dario spent the last decade making it untouchable. It's his crown jewel, and he's giving it to that gutter trash cutler on a silver platter. He was breathing hard, his loyalty to his boss at war with his fury at the decision. He's doing it for me, I whispered. He's doing it, Marco corrected, his voice rough. In exchange for Cutler signing a binding truce that states you, Lena Vance, are untouchable, off limits, to him, to Eli, to any of their associates, forever. He's giving up a piece of his kingdom so that you can be safe, so that this war stops before it really begins. I just stared at him. It wasn't a trade, it was a ransom. I had felt betrayed, thinking I was an object he was bartering, but Marco's words, a piece of his kingdom. He wasn't selling me. He was buying my freedom. He was paying for it with a piece of his own legacy. The guilt was overwhelming. The value he had just placed on my head was staggering. That's too much, I choked out. Yeah, Marco said, his face grim. It is. But he's the boss, and he's not asking anyone's permission. He turned to the door. He'll be back at Arbor Hill tonight. He's moving you from here this afternoon. Leo will be outside your door. He left, and I was alone again. But the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with the deafening sound of Dario's sacrifice. They moved me back to the apartment that afternoon. I was bruised, I had a concussion, and my arm was in a sling from where the seatbelt had torn at my shoulder. But I was alive. The apartment was silent, but it was no longer a cage. It was a fortress, paid for. I knew he wouldn't come to the apartment first. He wouldn't want me to see him like that. After a defeat. The access panel to the rooftop was in a utility closet by the penthouse elevator. Marco had given me my own fob, my own key. I had full access. The wind was cold when I pushed the heavy door open. It was almost midnight. The city was a glittering, indifferent sprawl of lights below. He was there. He was standing at the very edge of the parapet, staring down, no suit jacket, no tie, just his white shirt, unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up, billowing in the wind. He looked exhausted. He looked broken. This wasn't the boss. This wasn't the silent, intimidating man from the diner. This was the man who had just given up a piece of his soul. I walked toward him, my footsteps silent on the gravel. He didn't turn. He knew I was there. You should be in bed, Lena. His voice was rough, scraped raw by the wind and exhaustion. I came to stand beside him, my good hand gripping the cold, concrete edge. Marco told me, I said, about the port. He didn't react. He just kept staring at the city. It's just business. Was it worth it? I whispered. He finally turned. His face, in the dim light of the city glow, was all shadows. He looked older. He looked beaten. He's a fool, Dario said, his voice flat. Cutler, he thinks he won. He thinks he took something from me. He did, I said. He took your port. He took a pile of rocks and water, Dario said, turning back to the skyline. He thinks he's a king, but he's just a rat who found a piece of cheese. We stood in silence, the wind whipping my hair around my face. I had to ask. The question that had been burning in me since the kitchen. The question that had just become 1,000,000 times more important. Why? I asked. Why are you doing all this? The apartment, the car, the protection, the port, Dario. Why? He closed his eyes. He let out a long breath. His shoulders, which always seemed to carry the weight of the world, slumping. He turned to me, his eyes dark and so full of pain I didn't understand. The first night I saw you, he said. His voice so quiet I had to lean in to hear him over the wind. In that diner, you were so terrified, but you were still standing. You were still pouring coffee, still fighting. You had A light. A light that someone was trying to put out. He looked down at his hands, at the hands that had pulled me from the wreckage. I've been this thing for so long. Lena, the boss, the shadow. I'm a man who lives in the dark. I've done things. I've built an empire on fear. He finally looked at me, and his gaze was so raw, so vulnerable, it stole my breath. "'Cause you make me want to be more than just who I've always been." "Wow," he whispered. My heart just stopped. He wasn't saving me. He wasn't protecting me. We were saving each other. I reached out, my fingers trembling, and laid my good hand on his chest, right over his heart. It was beating, a strong, steady rhythm. He covered my hand with his touch warm, engulfing. "Dario," I breathed. He leaned in. The kiss wasn't like the kitchen, all fire and desperation. It wasn't the bar. It was soft. It was slow. It was a question, and an answer, and a promise, all in one. It was tender. It was a quiet, desperate plea under the cold, uncaring skyline. It was two broken people, finding a way to be whole. "It's over," he murmured against my lips. "The deal is done. You're safe." But Eli was not a man who honored deals. He was a creature of obsession. The truce, to him, was just a temporary setback. He broke the deal. I was back at the hospital 2 days later, a follow-up to check my concussion. A new nurse, a woman I didn't recognize, came to take me to the neurology wing. "Doctor, Matthews will see you now," she said, her smile too bright. Leo, my guard, was uncomfortable. "I should come with, Frey," he said. "Nonsense," the nurse chirped. "It's a sterile floor. He'll be right back. We're just going 2 floors down." Leo hesitated. I gave him a small, reassuring smile. "It's fine. Leo, I'll be back in 20 minutes. It was my last mistake. The nurse pushed my wheelchair into the elevator. The doors closed, and she pressed the button for the basement, for the parking garage. "Wait," I said, my blood turning cold. "You said—" She didn't look at me. The doors opened. He was there, leaning against a beat-up sedan, Eli. He was smiling, that awful proprietary smile. "Hello, baby," he whispered. "You miss me?" "No," I gasped, trying to push myself out of the chair, but he was too fast. He grabbed me, his hand clamping over my mouth, the other arm like a steel band around my ribs. He was so strong. He was high. His eyes were wide, pupils dilated. "She's all yours," the nurse said, already backing into the elevator. "You broke the deal," I mumbled against his hand, the terror so complete I could barely breathe. "He's a fool!" Eli laughed, his voice giddy. He was dragging me to the car. "He thought he could buy you? He thought he could take what's mine. I'm going to show him. I'm going to show everyone." He threw me into the back seat, his hand still on my mouth, and climbed in after me. I heard Marco's voice in the apartment. He'd been teaching me, bored, waiting for Dario. He'd been showing me tricks. "They grab you. You don't pull. You push. Use their momentum. And never, ever let them get you in the car." It was too late. I was in the car. "Dario is furious," Marco's voice said over the phone. "I was in Dario's study. I wasn't supposed to hear—" "She's gone. He's in a bad way." Eli got to him, broke the truce. There was silence, and then I heard Dario's voice. It was not the voice of the man on the rooftop. It was not the voice of the man at my bedside. It was the voice of the boss. "No more meetings," he said, the words like chips of ice. "No more peace." The world was a blur. Eli was driving, one-handed, the other hand tangled in my hair, yanking my head back. He was ranting about how I'd betrayed him, about how Dario was a fool, about how he was going to fix me. He was taking me to the old cannery. I knew it. His old place. I was terrified, but beneath the terror there was something else, a cold, hard rage. This man, this pathetic, whining boy, had cost Dario his port. He had tried to kill us, and now he was bragging. If they grab your hair, Marco's voice echoed in my head, you don't pull back. You grab their wrist, both hands, and you push it hard into your own head. It breaks their grip. Eli was high, his grip sloppy. He was ranting, his eyes on the road. He yanked my hair hard. Are you listening to me, Lena? I screamed, and I did it. I grabbed his wrist with both hands. I slammed it forward into my own skull. His fingers, bent at the wrong angle, splayed open. He howled, his grip breaking. He slammed on the brakes, the car skidding. He turned, his face a mask of rage, his fist raised. You! I didn't wait. I was not the old Lena. I rammed the heel of my good hand, my right hand into his nose. I remembered what Marco said, not a punch, a strike, all your weight, aim for the bone. I felt a wet, sickening crunch. Eli screamed, a sound I had never heard, a sound of pure agony. Blood exploded. He fell back against the driver's door, clutching his face. I didn't wait. I scrambled, pulled the door handle, and tumbled out of the moving car. I hit the pavement, scraping my hands, my injured shoulder screaming in protest. I got up. I ran. I didn't know where I was. An industrial park. Alleys, warehouses. I just ran. I ran until my lungs were on fire and my shoulder was a ball of agony. I saw lights, a gas station. I stumbled toward it, a wild, gasping, bloody mess, a payphone. My fingers were shaking, slick with my own blood from the pavement. I fumbled in my pocket, my hospital bracelet, no money. I saw the clerk inside, staring at me, his hand on the phone. I didn't care. I pulled out the new phone Dario had given me. Eli hadn't found it. It was in the pocket of the sweatpants they'd given me. I hit the only number on the speed dial. He answered on the first ring. Lena, not a question, a statement. I'm at a gas station, I sobbed, collapsing against the cold metal of the phone booth. On River Street. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was crying, the sobs ripping out of me. I didn't think you'd still come. I wept, the old terrible belief surfacing. I'm in too much trouble. I am 5 minutes out, he said. His voice was not calm. It was a controlled, thermonuclear rage. Stay in the light. Do not move. The line went dead. I huddled there, watching the road. It wasn't 5 minutes. It was 3. Headlights, a black, gleaming SUV. It screeched to a halt, fishtailing, its tires smoking. But it wasn't alone. 2 more SUVs pinned the gas station in, blocking the exits. Eli, and he had followed me, his beat-up sedan, its front end smashed, roared into the lot, blocking me in. He stumbled out, his face a mask of blood, a gun in his hand. You're mine, he screamed, leveling the gun at me. No, a voice said. Dario. He was standing by his car. He was in a black suit, his hand at his side. He was perfectly calm. It's over, Eli, he said. Well, it's over when I say it's over, Eli screamed, his hand shaking. A red dot appeared on Eli's forehead. Another on his chest. I saw Marco and 2 other men, stepping out of the shadows, their weapons trained. Eli saw it, too. His bravado crumpled, the gun wavered. He looked at me, at Dario, at the red dots. He dropped the gun. It clattered to the pavement. It was over, just like that. Marco and his men were on him, disarming him, zipping his hands behind his back. He was screaming, crying, pathetic. Dario hadn't moved. He was just watching me. He walked toward me, his pace measured, his eyes never leaving mine. He looked at my scraped hands, my torn sweatpants, my face. He opened his arms. I fell into him. He held me, his arms like steel, his face buried in my hair. He was shaking. Or maybe I was. I told you, he whispered, his voice a low, furious, protective growl against my ear. You're not running anymore. The trial of Eli Vance was not a trial. It was a formality. I walked into that courtroom, my hand not in Dario's, but held at my side. He was there, sitting in the front row, a silent, imposing shadow in a dark suit. But this, I had told him. I had to do myself. I was not the same woman who had fled into the night. I was not the terrified girl from the diner. The woman who walked to the witness stand had slept in a fortress, had been kissed by a king, and had faced down her own demon in a gas station parking lot. I was no longer running. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" the bailiff asked, his voice flat. "I do," I said. My voice didn't tremble. It was clear, and it filled the quiet wood-paneled room. The prosecutor, a sharp-faced woman who had met with me and Dario's lawyers for 3 days straight, stood. Her questions were simple, precise. She was not a pit bull. She was a surgeon. "Miss Vance, can you identify the man who abducted you from East Briar General Hospital?" I turned. He was there, at the defendant's table, flanked by a public defender who looked defeated before the trial had even begun. Eli. He looked pathetic. His bravado was gone. His nose was still crooked from where I had broken it. His eyes, the eyes that had held me captive for 2 years, were no longer wild with power. They were the eyes of a cornered rat. They were filled with a weak, sputtering hatred. He was wearing an ill-fitting suit, and he was small. I had been so afraid of this? "Yes," I said, my voice ringing with a cold, clear certainty. "He's right there. Eli Vance." He flinched. He actually flinched at the sound of my voice. And what did he do? I told them. I told them everything. Not the old shame, not the emotional manipulation. I told them the facts. I told them about the stalking, the slashed tires, the texts, the threats, the kidnapping. I told them about the gun. The cross-examination was a joke. Eli's lawyer stood up, shuffled some papers, and asked me 2 perfunctory questions. "Miss Vance, isn't it true you were in a romantic relationship with my client?" "A long time ago," I said, my gaze level, "before he became this." "And isn't it true you are now associated with Mr. Dario Moretti?" "Objection," the prosecutor said, her voice lazy. "Sustained," the judge said, not even looking up. "Move on, counselor, or don't." The lawyer sat down. The verdict came an hour later. Guilty on all counts: kidnapping, assault, illegal firearm possession, violation of a binding truce. That last one had been added by a very influential lawyer. Eli stood for his sentencing. He was shaking, and for a moment he looked at me. His face was a mask of pleading, of terror, the mask of the boy I had once known. But it was too late. The judge was a stern, older man. I had seen him, just once, having a quiet dinner with Dario at an expensive restaurant, back before the ambush. "Mr. Vance," the judge said, his voice gravelly, "your actions are not just criminal, they are cowardly. You preyed on the weak, you broke a truce. In this city, we do not tolerate men who break their word." He was sentenced to 20 years with no possibility of parole. He was sobbing as they led him away. A pathetic, broken thing. He was gone. I stood outside the courthouse, the sun hitting my face. I had done it. I had faced him, and I had won. Dario came up beside me. When he didn't touch me, he just stood there, his presence a warm, solid wall. "It's over," he said quietly. "It's over," I repeated. I took a deep, shuddering breath of free air. The peace lasted for 2 weeks. 2 weeks of quiet, 2 weeks of physical therapy for my shoulder, 2 weeks of Dario working from the apartment, his meetings with Marco subdued, his phone calls less frequent. The city was healing. Cutler was in ruins, his operation shattered, his organization crumbling now that the South Dock was no longer his. He had lost the respect of his own men. We were normal, or our version of it. We ate dinner together. We slept, tangled together, his warmth a constant comfort. He would read his ledgers, his face tense with concentration, and I would read a book, my head on his shoulder. It was quiet. I had even bought a plant. A small, green, leafy thing. A photo. I'd seen it in the lobby of a flower shop when Tony was driving me back from therapy. "Stop," I'd said. I walked in, bought the plant and a small ceramic pot, and carried it back to the apartment. Dario had looked at it, confused. "What's that?" "It's a plant," I said, placing it on the wide, sunny windowsill. "It's for the apartment." He had looked at me, a slow, soft understanding in his eyes. He had come over, his hand touching my cheek. "It's a home," he'd said, his voice rough. "Yes," I'd whispered. It was 2 days after that. I was watering my plant. Dario was leaving for a real meeting, the first one he'd had at his downtown office since the ambush. He was in his suit, his tie perfectly knotted. He looked powerful, like the man I had first seen. "You're sure you'll be okay?" I asked, misting the leaves. "Marco will be with me," he said, adjusting his cufflinks, "and Leo is outside the door, and you have your panic button." "I don't need a panic button," I said, smiling. "I have a plant." He smiled, a real, genuine smile, one that lit up his dark eyes. He came over, kissed me hard. "I'll be back by 5. "Don't be late," I said. He was late. At 5:30, I was starting to pace. At 6, I called his phone. It went to voicemail. At 6:05, my phone rang. It was Marco. "Lena," he said, and his voice was wrong. It was tight, panicked. "Marco, what's wrong? Where is he?" "There was an incident at the office." "An incident?" My blood went cold. "A car. An explosion when he was leaving the garage." My knees buckled. I sank to the floor. My plant, my stupid, happy plant, blurring in my vision. "No." "He's alive," Marco said, fast. "He's alive. Lena, but he's hurt. We're at East Briar General. He's asking for you." I was there in 10 minutes. Tony drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, the siren Dario had installed for the first time. The emergency room was chaotic, but for me, the waters parted. Marco was there, his suit jacket singed, a cut over his eye. "Where is he?" I demanded. "This way." He wasn't a patient. He was a king holding court in a trauma bay. The doctors were fluttering around him, and he was sitting up. He was covered in soot. His shirt was torn, and his left arm was a mess. Blood. So much blood, but he was alive, and he was furious. "Get them out," he was snarling at a doctor. "Sir, we need to get you to surgery. You have shrapnel." "Dario!" His head snapped up, his eyes wild with rage and adrenaline, found mine, and the storm, it just stopped. "Lena?" he breathed. I was at his side in a second. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I was a pillar of ice. "What happened?" I asked, my hand going to his face, his cheek rough with stubble and grime. "Cutler's remnants," Marco said from the doorway. "A last, desperate act of stupidity. A car bomb. Dario pushed me out of the way." "You're hurt," I whispered, my eyes on his arm. "It's nothing, none," he growled, but his face was pale, his skin clammy. "Doctor," I said, turning to the man who was hovering. "What does he need?" "He needs surgery," the doctor said, relieved to be talking to someone sane. "He has multiple shrapnel wounds, a severe laceration, and a broken—" "Do it," I said. "I am not—" Dario started. "Yes, you are," I said, my voice cutting through his. I turned my full attention to him. My hands were on his face, forcing him to look at me. "You are going to let them fix you," I said, my voice low, intense. "You are not going to be a stubborn, idiotic boss. You are going to be going to be okay. Do you understand me, Dario Moretti?" He stared at me. His eyes, which had been wild, softened. He saw the steel in my spine. He saw the terror I was holding back. He saw me. He let out a short, painful breath. "Yes, Lena." He was in surgery for 3 hours. I sat in the waiting room. Marco sat with me. We didn't talk. We just waited. The roles were reversed. I was the one sitting vigil. I was the one in the uncomfortable chair, staring at a blank wall, my heart in my throat. When the surgeon came out, I was on my feet. "He's fine," the doctor said, smiling. "He's a very tough man. We removed all the fragments. He'll be in a cast for 6 weeks, and he'll have a scar, but he's going to make a full recovery." I closed my eyes, my head falling back. The relief was so profound. It was a physical pain. I did not leave. I sat in that chair. I slept in that chair. When they moved him to a private room, I was there. When he woke up, I was the first thing he saw. He was pale, his arm a massive white plaster cast, his chest bandaged, but his eyes were clear. "Hey," I whispered. "You're still here," he murmured, his voice thick with anesthesia. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, my hand finding his, lacing my fingers with his good one. "And neither are you." His recovery was an education. Dario Moretti was not a good patient. He hated weakness. He hated the stillness. He hated, more than anything, that he couldn't roll his own shirt sleeves. But I was there. I was not the scared, trembling girl. I was his partner. I fed him. I argued with his doctors. I managed his calls, and I was the one who was there. 3 weeks later, when he sat down with Marco in the apartment study, I was sitting in the corner, reading, pretending not to listen. "It's done," Marco said. "The last of them are gone. The city is clean. The new port operations are already up. Legitimate. We're good, boss." Dario was standing by the window. His arm was still in a sling, but he was in his suit. He was looking down at the city. "Good," Dario said. "Then it's yours." Marco went still. "What's mine?" "The operations," Dario said. The old way, as you call it. The running of it. The street. I'm tired, Marco." Marco just stared. "Boss, you're not—" "I'm not retiring," Dario said, turning. A small smile touched his lips. "I'm just promoting. The Moretti family is moving. All legitimate, shipping, real estate, this other business. I'm done with it. I'm done with the blood. I'm done with the bombs." He walked over to Marco and put his good hand on his friend's shoulder. "You've been my right hand for 10 years. It's time you were the head. You will run. The old business. And you will answer me. But I'm building something else." His eyes met mine, across the room. "Something that lasts." Marco looked humbled. He looked proud. He nodded. "Once, yes, boss." Life became quiet. It was a quiet I had never known. A quiet that wasn't the prelude to a storm. It was just peace. Dario was still powerful. He was still respected, but he was different. He smiled more. He spent his days in his study, on the phone, but his calls were about stock prices and building permits. He was, in every sense of the word, a legitimate businessman. He was still the boss, but he was not feared, not in the same way. And I was Lena Vance. I was not Mrs. Moretti. I was not his toy. I was his partner. I had moved into the apartment, for real. My old life was gone, but I had brought me. I had bought more plants. The windowsill was a jungle of green. I had bought books, which lined the shelves. I had bought a bright red teapot, which Dario pretended to hate, but used every morning. I was a woman who had a home. I was a woman who had a life. I was standing on the balcony. It was almost a year later. The night was cold, the sky clear, the city lights flickering below like a carpet of fallen stars. I was wearing one of Dario's cashmere sweaters, my hands wrapped around a warm mug of tea. I had everything, and I was terrified. The old voice, the old shame. It was quiet now, but it was still there. A whisper. "You don't deserve this. You're the girl from the basement. This is all a dream, and you're going to wake up." I heard the door slide open. I didn't have to turn. I felt his warmth. He came up behind me, his arms, strong and sure, wrapped around my waist. His cast was long gone, but the scar was there, a dark, angry line on his forearm, a reminder of what we had survived. He pulled me back against his chest, his chin resting on the top of my head. We stood there, in silence, just breathing. "It's so beautiful," I whispered, looking at the lights. "It is," he said, his voice a low rumble against my back, but he wasn't looking at the city. He was looking at me. "I still don't know if I deserve this," I said, the words slipping out, quiet, honest, the last stubborn piece of my fear. He went still. He turned me, gently. He turned me in his arms until I was facing him. His hands, warm and calloused, cupped my face, his thumbs stroking my cheeks. His eyes were so dark, so deep, I could drown in them. "Lena," he said, his voice soft, "you're right, you don't deserve this." My heart, it just broke. "You deserve more," he whispered, his thumb brushing my bottom lip. "You deserve everything. You deserve a man who didn't have to be broken to see the light. You deserve a life that wasn't paid for in blood and sacrifice." Dario, no, was... "But I'm what you've got," he said, a small, sad smile on his face. "I'm a selfish man, Lena. I'm not letting you go, ever." He leaned in, his forehead pressing against mine. "So if you still don't know if you deserve this," he whispered, "then I guess we'll spend the rest of our lives proving you do." I was crying, not tears of sadness, not tears of fear, tears of release. He kissed me. It was a slow, soft kiss that tasted of promises and of coffee and of home. "I love you," I whispered, the words I had been too afraid to say. "I know," he said, and he kissed me again. I rested my head against his chest, my ear over his heart. It was beating, strong and steady. His arms were locked around me, a fortress against the world. Below us, the city lights flickered, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the dark. I was home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We truly hope you enjoyed the journey with Lena and Dario. We would love to hear from you. Please, drop a comment and let us know where in the world you're listening from. If you enjoyed this, please take a moment to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories so you never miss a new chapter. And finally, what did you think? Let us know your thoughts about the story in English. Your feedback means everything.